Hi everybody, my name's Veer Longmore. I'm the Chair of Novus Victoria and the Oceania region. Welcome to our second episode of our Industry Insights interview series. The Industry Insights series forms part of our Gap to Grow 12-week campaign that we launched at the beginning of the Covid-19 lockdown restrictions to keep delivering value to our members and our community. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Linda Tivendale, a Senior Lecturer at Deakin University, and also the Chair of the CIOB Melbourne Hub, which is our Senior Professionals Network. Welcome and good afternoon, Linda.
Hello, Veer. It's good to be here.
Fantastic, and thanks for coming on board. So what we might do, Linda, is get a bit of an introduction on yourself, what you're up to at the moment, and we also might go back in time a little bit and hear about why you chose to study and work in the built environment, what attracted you initially, and first job and career direction from there.
Yep. All right then. I'm currently a senior lecturer at Deakin in construction management. I've been there for nearly 10 years, and before that I was at the TAFE. So I was one of the teachers at the TAFE delivering diploma of building and construction. Mm-hmm. Before that, for probably 30 years before that, I was in industry. And I guess I had an interest in construction or building because my father was a demolisher, and so I grew up playing on demolition sites, and it was just lots of fun. You couldn't go off and do a course in demolition, and so the next best thing seemed to be to find, to do something that once the site was empty, what would happen after that? When I started, obviously there were not many females at all. There's still not many females, but when I started, it was very much not the done thing. It was there was a lot of discrimination and just generally not sort of overt poor behaviour, but it wasn't easy. And so I started off, I think you mentioned my first job. My first job was with a bank, looking after their bank premises. Okay. And I've done a range of things since then. Before I moved into education, I was a contract administrator on sort of larger commercial projects. And in between, I did really piddly little stuff and more important stuff and bigger stuff. The really good thing was that I was able to combine it with the rest of my life. I found that when I had children, I could pick up part-time work or 6 weeks of contract work, or there was always something available. I didn't have, nowadays graduates sort of have a vision of their career path.
That's right.
I didn't have that. If somebody contacted me and said, hey, do you want to do this? I'd go, yes. And I think because I was a female, I was a little bit more visible. They knew who I was. They knew I was having babies. It perhaps worked to my advantage. And then,
so you found a flexible nature in the industry that perhaps not everyone identifies the industry with.
That's right. And even now, it's very difficult to. The industry has this idea that they don't have part-time work. The reality is that nearly all of our students are involved in part-time work. But when you talk to the industry, they will say, oh, we don't have any part-time employees. And you say, well, I know you've got half a dozen of our students. And they're like, oh yeah, that doesn't count for some reason. And they haven't yet cottoned on. They might now with COVID. They might actually be rethinking how they view things. They haven't quite recognized that they can adjust what they're doing to accommodate part-time. And I know that a couple of the women who have graduated from Deakin have started a family, but I'm not 100% sure what's happened when they've returned to the workplace. So I think it's an area that, and it shouldn't be just available to women in any case. There are older people who want to transition to retirement. There are younger people who just don't want to work full time. So there's a whole lot of reasons why people have the skills, and the industry is a little bit slow to pick that up. Yeah,
that's right. And I personally don't think it's something that can't be accommodated. Just something that there's a reluctancy to accommodate. When you think about a part-time role, I think employers are fearful that they go, oh, well, how are they going to, drop in and drop out of this task or this project?
Yeah.
Well, if you structure it in a way that you can cater to those employees, then that issue goes away, and you can install that flexibility. But I also pick up on your comment around, female involvement in the industry. My experience, having studied at Deakin and done a Bachelor of Architecture and Bachelor of Construction Management, I still felt in the construction management degree that there were fairly good numbers of female students. And would you say that we're waiting for that to convert into the industry?
Yeah, I think what it is the numbers of females are okay, not, somewhere between 10 and 20%, varies greatly each year.
Right.
But I think what has changed is that there is no barrier to the women obtaining employment. And in fact, that course that you did, the people who just walk out the door with jobs are the female graduates of the combined degree with architecture. And so industry will contact us still and say, do you have any young women who are doing the combined degree? I'm, they're the sort of winners, as it were. I think the barrier at the moment is still with just getting people to consider built environment degrees and education in the first place. I think that is still the sticking point. And you're right in that as soon as we have the female head of, multiplex or built or Canes standing there talking about what they're doing, the more likely it is that we will have the females who are at school or doing some other job that they're not happy with, who will say, oh, well, that's an avenue for me. Yeah, so I think that's it. There's a lot of work being done by, the industry a little bit, and certainly all universities and the government, their STEM programs and all of that. So there's lots of work in it. There's no reason why women can't do it. So yeah, it's that's the way it is at the moment.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we can certainly boost those 10 to 20% numbers over the coming years and see the shift in the industry. I know, working in the industry, I think I'm starting to see it slowly, and not just in construction, but, still obviously a way to go. And something we do as CIOB Novus is we don't just engage with, university students, but also school-age students. And as you said, it's about that interest in the first place of getting into construction and the built environment, and having role models and having examples to follow, and shifting, some of those mindsets of what, young females in, even starting from primary school, having an idea that all those options are there. So, hopefully we get our act together and make some good improvements. So obviously, COVID-19's been a big factor for all of us globally. Pretty much every industry's been touched by it. Some good, some bad, mostly bad. But there's certainly some profiteers in there as well. And I guess in a university sense, universities have had to pivot to purely online education. Now, I know Deakin certainly offers courses, through online study already. So, but you've had to go from, I guess, a limited pool of study offerings to the whole thing. So what's that been like for you as a lecturer? And I guess, a member of staff in the School of Architecture and Built Environment, and a member of staff of Deakin University.
Yeah, and Deakin and all universities, they already have online platforms, and construction management has always delivered some of their units online, usually over trimester 3, but the master's course, for instance, is available completely online. But the majority of students are enrolled in campus mode. And so there are still a large number of students who have never had any experience with online learning. They've had experience with going on to what Deakin calls the cloud, going onto the cloud and, checking their results or submitting an assignment or looking for a, recording of a lecture. But that's a lot different to being taught online. And what we were doing, scaling it for 20 students or even 50 students is a lot different to delivering it to 400 students. And in construction management, we were sort of ready to just swap. We swapped instantly overnight almost. And we managed to do that. But in architecture, for instance, which is part of our school, they had to stop and think more clearly, particularly about the studio and the design units, about how they could engage with their students to do all of that. So we were, as a school and as a university, we pivoted fairly quickly, and we pivoted fairly well. But we're hoping we'll do it better the second time around in when we start up again in July. So we've just finished one semester, excuse me, and we're about to start again in about another 6 weeks.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the main thing that happened was that it became instantly clear that the students were worried. So it wasn't even that the students couldn't find the information or didn't know how to log on, or some of them didn't have laptops or didn't have internet at home because they relied on the many universities are open 24 hours a day. If you want good internet access, I mean, we had some staff who were like, I want to go to campus because my internet access at home is terrible. Especially in regional areas. And so there was all of those problems, but the main thing with the students was that they were just anxious. They were just, what's happening? How long do we have to do this for? What's going to happen? How will I do X? How will I do Y? They were, looking way ahead at all sorts of things and going, how will this be managed? How will that be managed? And we were approaching it in a sort of, don't worry about that, just just do this now. And in part because sometimes we didn't know, but in part because we probably felt it was better to just give them, for this week do this, and for this week do that. And I think all staff did it slightly differently. We all have the same sort of platform, but some people use Zoom, some people use Blackboard Collaborate, some people may have used something else, I don't know. But we also had students who were stranded. So they were meant to be coming to campus, but they were left in their home country, the international students. So we had students who, we had a whole group of different students that we had to sort of manage, all of whom had different concerns and different worries. So we had to try and field all that.
I mean, my recollection, certainly, there were periods in university where even face-to-face teaching, you're pretty stressed out. So I can imagine that it converts to purely online, and all those questions I probably would have been asked in the same ones. And probably quite a stressful time, but it seems like it's really just an adjustment phase, and that things start to become a bit more streamlined over time, I guess. And certainly for your second trimester.
Yes, we'll be fine for the second trimester. I mean, we were pretty fine, but we'll be better. And if we have to keep doing it, we'll be even better the next time around.
That's right. Practice makes perfect, I guess.
And the university, and I suspect all universities, were very flexible in terms of cut-off dates for withdrawing and enrolling, and extensions, and all of the sort of normal administrative procedures were relaxed. I mean, let's be honest, they were all relaxed. Even things like the exams, a 2-hour exam is still a 2-hour exam, but students will be given longer to do it because they'll be doing it in an online environment. And so we're allowing for A, their nervousness, and B, if something goes wrong in the middle.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like things are pretty under control. And in terms of, I guess, every student's biggest question, and we briefly touched on this earlier, every student's biggest question in their degree and when they're studying is, will I get a job? And, am I an attractive candidate for a job? And you're sort of thinking that, every day for 3 years. So I'm interested to hear from you. Has it been sort of dead quiet? And companies don't seem to be taking on looking for grads or students, or have things continued as normal, or have you even seen an uptick in contractors looking for workers?
We haven't seen an uptick. We have certainly dropped off in terms of just the random companies saying, we're really busy, can you give us somebody to, we need somebody to start tomorrow. But what we've noticed, and this is just the students that I deal with and that some of the other academics, that students who had part-time jobs on the whole have kept those part-time jobs. Similarly, the students who had full-time jobs, so our graduates that we're still in touch with, they all kept their full-time jobs. So we haven't seen a sort of mass loss of employment. We've had 3 students placed in new positions in the last 4 weeks. So that is an indication that companies, I think in the beginning, so if we take this as like a 10-week sort of thing, we went online in week 2, and we've just finished week 11. So if we take this as a 9 or 10-week thing, I think in those first few weeks, everybody, including us, including you, were just, our heads were exploding and we were just doing whatever we needed to do to deal with our tomorrow tasks and do them. And I think then Easter provided us, everybody, with a little bit of breathing space. And then I think since then, some companies have thought, well, we still need someone. They've taken a more sort of, they're putting people on it for short terms. So they're not saying we need a part-timer. They're saying we need someone for the next 10 weeks or for the next 6 weeks or for whatever. And they're having us sort of manage that process a bit more. So I think they're saying, if you send us someone, that's fine, but they don't have the time or the energy to really engage too much. So I think also,
so you're a part-time recruiter.
Yes, that's right, which we're happy to do. But I think the industry, I mean, the big picture is that, the industry kept working the whole time. Most industries didn't. So the industry kept working. The projects are still out there. The government theoretically is supportive. So we are telling our students that they shouldn't panic at this point, that we haven't seen the signs that it's all going to go pear-shaped. And I think that's anybody's best guess. Like every time you read the paper, like in this morning's Age, there was a thing about, the housing crisis and this. But again, we've got graduates who are working in housing and they're still busy and they're still, I mean, I suspect there'll be smaller builders who will not survive in the same way as, but perhaps, this might sound harsh, but they probably didn't employ our graduates in any case. So I think the people who tend to employ our graduates are still there, still working. They've still got projects starting. Like we still get press releases about this project's about to start and this project's about to start. So,
I think, you know, there was the immediate fear and the sort of future fear, and the immediate fear in construction was, are we going to get shut down? You know, are we literally going to have to lock gates and the sites go silent? And
Yeah.
we never got to that point. And I think there was a lot of concern, you know, through March of, you know, is Scott Morrison or Dan Andrews going to get up one morning and shut us down? And so,
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen the activity continue. It's just that the efficiency has probably taken the biggest hit. So you're not cramming, you know, trades into an alley Mac anymore.
Yes.
You know, you've got to
Yeah.
do multiple trips to get trades up, and, you know, things
Yeah.
like this, and your smaller crews, open air. And so it's probably efficiency that's taken the biggest hit on site versus, you know, the sites, you know, not being active anymore. And I guess it'll be a matter of sort of watching and waiting what happens around the economy as well, because a lot of the projects, as you say, are sort of keep on keeping on. It'll be, yeah, those new projects and what happens in the fourth quarter and delayed onset of investment. But that's when we look to a stimulus.
That's
And we look to our friends in the government to help us out and support the construction sector as such a
yeah.
big contributor to Victoria and Australia's economies.
It
and
is.
I think I've got a sneaking suspicion they might just help us through the following quarters of this year and into next. So I'm sure that will reflect in graduate employment as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And now, I guess a bit closer to home, around the, you know, us being the CIOB, and you've recently come on board as the chair of the Melbourne hub. And after, you know, being involved with the Australian Institute of Building for some time, so you're very active in the peak body space. What sort of things are you hoping to get out of your new role as chair of the CIOB Melbourne hub? And I guess as a global, you know, peak body, what do you see as the CIOB's relevance in Australia? And you know, as an academic as well, what would you say is the importance of universities in Australia being affiliated and accredited by the CIOB?
Yeah, so I'm just very new in this role, and I do have a sort of basic philosophy of supporting professional organisations. I think they're really important organisations, and in Australia generally, they don't have always, well, in the construction industry, they don't have that sort of recognition that they do in some other parts of the world. And there's a whole range of reasons for that. And part of that is because there's no requirement for anybody to be a member. So, you know, if you're an accountant, you have to be, you know, and if you're an engineer, and there's a whole lot of other sort of fields in the built environment or other fields where you have to. But in, you know, I don't know that too many employers, you know, really look to see if anybody's professional members of an organisation. But I think they're important, and they're important from the accrediting point of view, because obviously as a university, we want to make sure that we're teaching what industry wants, and our best way to find out what industry wants is to talk to the peak bodies that represent industry. And so that's part of it. We want our students to be able to take their qualification anywhere and still have them say, yep, that's fine. If you've studied that, then you know what you're doing. You can work here or there or somewhere else. The CIOB is a global organisation in a way that obviously the Australian Institute of Building is not. You know, the AIB has links with other parts of the world, but the CIOB is a major player in the European and the UK space. And so I think what I would like to see is, and again, because of my background, more of that connection between the CIOB members and what happens in education. So less perhaps the peak body representative, but the people who are putting that they're a member of the CIOB after their name, you know, sort of putting their, you know, time where their mouth is, perhaps,
Yeah,
and saying, well, as a CIOB member, I have gained this from being a CIO member, and I will put something back into that.
sure.
And so just strengthening links between industry and education and new graduates and sort of, people in the early stages of their career is important, because it's very easy to sort of to be quite involved while you're a student in a whole range of things. And then what often happens is that people start work and they become so busy and
Hmm.
so overwhelmed by all the things that they don't know. and
Yes.
it's such a steep learning curve once you start.
Yeah.
And it would be good if we could, and Novus does that well, but it would be good if we could make that transition a little bit more, just easier for everybody concerned, because it benefits industry as much as it benefits the early graduate.
That's right. And, from my perspective, graduating and working full time in the industry, I found being involved with peak bodies, it didn't, yes, I mean, it can be a commitment if you want to join the committees and the branches and things, but you can also just go along to events and enjoy the networking opportunities. And what I found through both was that it actually supports you in the
Yeah,
early years of your career. So when a lot of graduates or young professionals might think, I don't have any time for that, they probably don't realise that if you make time for it, you might actually turn up to work the next day more confident,
yeah.
more self-assured, and with better connections than you had at the start of the week. And
Hmm.
if you're doing your networking well, you'll start to build up a Rolodex of people that you can call when you are stressed, unsure, feel out of your depth. But if you don't, put yourself out there and engage
Yeah.
with peak bodies and networking groups and groups like Novus and the CIOB Hub, you'll only have what you do now. So it can probably assist you in your more difficult times rather than put more on your plate.
That's true. And look, it can be it can be overwhelming. There's nothing worse
Mm,
than arriving at a room full of people and you don't know anybody, and you're sort of not sure why you're there. And
yes.
but the whole point of it is, and the people who run it are aware of the fact that people are coming in cold. And so, you just have to sort of overcome that initial fear and just go, well, this is it. The worst thing that will happen is that I'll have 2 hours that I'll never get back again. But in fact, the plus side is so much more than that. It really is. There's always something that you will gain from engaging with events and activities that are part of your industry. Nobody should just do a course because they want the bit of paper at the end. I would like to think that everybody who is doing a course is
Mm,
doing a course because they're interested in what the industry is doing. They're paying attention to the news reports. They're,
yes.
seeing to see what the government is doing about it. That's really the people who make a really good run of it in their career. Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you, and on the networking front as well. The more times you jump in the deep end, the better at swimming you get.
Yes,
So
that's true.
it becomes easier over time. Those daunting rooms are
Yeah.
daunting at the beginning, but over time they become much easier to work with. And I think absorbing the sector, like you're saying, and staying engaged and up to date. I know when studying, sometimes you can think, well, I've got too much information coming in. I can't possibly add more.
Yeah.
And the same with working. You think, I'm having to learn all these things. How can I read research papers and sort of stay ahead of the trends? Well,
Yeah.
that's where conversations come into play, and you don't actually have to learn everything in a traditional sense. And if you're attending events and engaging with peak bodies, you can just sort of learn it through osmosis.
Yeah,
And,
you
and it's
can.
amazing how up to date you stay with the local sector just through having a chat,
Yeah.
over a coffee or a beer. And And I guess the beauty of the CIOB is that you can touch on the local sector, but also the global sector as well.
Yeah.
And I guess that's quite an asset to someone, especially starting off in their career, to know what's going on at home and abroad within construction, and would likely put them ahead of their sort of peers and colleagues.
Yep. True.
Well, thanks very much for joining me today, Linda, and for your insights into what it's been like to manage as a lecturer in a university during COVID-19, and also tell us a little bit about yourself and what things have been like for students, and that there's still plenty of hope for students and graduates in the construction sector.
Absolutely, yes. No, I wouldn't give up on the construction industry just yet. It'll be fine, I think, in the longer run. Yes. So it's been a pleasure. It's nice to get a little bit more involved with the CIOB as I'm starting off. Yes.
Well, it's been great to have you, and it's good to have you on board as the Melbourne Hub Chair as well.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.